Welcome to the Traverse PC webinar on phrase-driven legal descriptions. This is our April 2018 web seminar, and we're going to take a look today at a feature that's new in TPC Desktop 2018 Release 1. We expect that to be out April 30th. It may be out a day or two later, we'll see. But we're pretty excited about this. We've had a lot of folks ask for a phrase-driven or user-definable legal description writer. Traverse PC has had a legal description writer for a lot of years, probably 20 plus years. And we're glad it did, because that makes sure that all of your bearings and distances and central angles and arc lengths come in without transcription errors. And then we've said you can go ahead and modify those however you want. But phrase-driven legal descriptions kind of take it to a new level as far as improving your workflows. So the phrase-driven legal descriptions are going to create more of the final legal description for you. And that's what we're going to take a look at here today. My name is John Balcom. I am part of the development team here at Traverse PC. I'm also an LS, and I'm just happy to have a tool like this to make writing legal descriptions a lot easier. So you all received an email, looks something like this. This is kind of our basic outline we're going to work from. We're going to take a look at a sample survey that we include with Traverse PC called Boundary Line Adjustments. And it's one that we did a number of years back, included a boundary line adjustment and some property surveys here, and provides a great place for us to kind of look at how we apply legal descriptions. And then some of you are going to apply for continuing education units or credits for this webinar. And so I'm going to be presenting 3 characters for a 3-character code throughout the seminar. And when you're all done, you can fill out a form and get credit for that. Legal descriptions are new. This phrase-driven legal description is new. So we expect to get a lot of suggestions about this in the coming months. Not only do you have local preferences for your state, your county, your province, whatever, but you're going to have your own personal way of doing it, so your own personal preferences, and that's just fine. I do want you to know that when we do create a legal description of a property like this, Traverse PC is going to generate a report for us, and that's a doc file. So I can open this up in any word processor. I can edit it right here inside of Traverse PC and add whatever I want, my own text. Okay, but I want you to know that it's just a Word doc, and you can do whatever you want to with it. So it's like our quick view technology. We want Traverse PC to do as much of the work for you as it can, and then you can go ahead and modify what Traverse PC has produced so you get exactly what you want. So let's go ahead and take a quick overview of kind of what this looks like and what the pieces are we're going to be taking a look at today. So I asked Traverse PC to show me the legal description for a particular lot here. So I went to the Traverses. I said, I want this lot for. So here's the Traverse view for that. And these are the calls in bearing, distance, radius, arc length, that sort of thing. And I produced this legal description for it. I did this from the Traverse Manager, but I can also do it right here in the Traverse view. I said, create a legal description report for this. And I'm just going to hit the preview here. And here's my legal description. So the calls in here, 895201 East, North 895201 East, are the same values that I'm going to see here in the Traverse view. And we're going to see there's a pretty neat relationship where the Traverses define the parcels that I want to create the legal description for. And we can add some additional commencement point chains, that sort of thing. We use the initial point and the closing point of the Traverse as our point of beginning. And it just is a real kind of a nice marriage between these Traverses that we've used forever and a legal description. And then we've got this dialog. This is new. Some of you who have been using Traverse PC for a lot of years had a real simple dialog before for legal descriptions. Once we get into phrase-driven legal descriptions, there are some more pieces to it. So it's a little more complex, but it does a lot more powerful. So we're trading off a little more complexity for a lot more power. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time in here taking a look at the different settings. We might want to say, hey, you know what? I want to include these phrases in there too, so I can kind of see what they look like and how I edit those. We're going to jump right into what these geodetic phrases look like, how we edit them, and what they do for us. These nested phrases. and you'll kind of then get a feel for how I work with this to get this style just the way I want. I've got several styles in here, one that uses clockwise, counterclockwise, one that uses left-right, one that does the style that Lane County wants me to submit, the default style. And basically you're going to come in and either starting with one of these styles or creating your own style, you're going to create one or more styles of legal descriptions that you typically use. And again, for your state, for your county, for your city, for a particular client. And that's the beauty of this phrase-driven legal description writer. So the pieces then are, we're going to have a traverse, okay, and I'm going to show you how to do a legal description for one traverse or multiple traverses. I go to the legal description dialog for this particular traverse, and I tell it which style I want to use and change any settings I want, that sort of thing. And then I can do this whole preview process where I look at it like this and say, yeah, it's looking pretty good. But when I go to do the final one, I don't want to include the courses or the labels. And then finally, I can just generate the report. I can make any changes that I want to that style. And here now I have my legal description ready to go in paragraph format, all uppercase characters. And I don't need this stuff that's up here already. I can just get rid of that. And again, I told you this is a word processor, so it's really easy for me to go in and make changes like that. Let's start by taking a look at some typical legal description workflows. We're going to look at 3 of them here real quick. I remember in college when I took fluid mechanics that we started out the first 3 weeks or so in the lab with the water tables. And that's because it would be real hard for us to learn the abstract concepts if we didn't have the concrete concepts in front of us. And that's kind of what I want to do with this. So let's go ahead and close this out. Let's go to a drawing for lot 4. Open that up. And I see that I've got a place here to insert a legal description. And let's go ahead and just get rid of what's in here right now. We'll leave legal description in there. Just get rid of everything else. So I've got a text box here ready for to put the legal description in. So let's create the legal description for this particular lot. Let's go to Tools, Legal Description Report. Let's choose the style that we want. In this case, I want default. Let's just check a couple of things on the settings. So I don't want the 1 course per line or labeled courses. I do that when I'm evaluating or reviewing the legal description, but I just want to write this one. I want to include side shots. I don't have any, so it won't make any difference. In descriptions, again, I don't have any. I want it to be uppercase, and I want to include the user ending sequence, and I want to include the area. Simple enough. So let's go ahead and generate that report. Now I've saved some things, changed some things in that style. And I'm going to say no. Those are things I change all the time, and I don't care to change them. And here's my legal description. So I'm going to copy everything from legal description down to here. I'm going to do a Control-C, but I could also right-click and copy. That'd be fine. Let's come back into our legal description. Just double-click that. Select it, paste. And there we've copied our legal description into our drawing. So we've got our drawing now ready to go with the legal description in it. So that's one typical workflow that we would do with this. Let's do a second one. I want to go back to our original plat that we had here. And let's go ahead and create a legal description for a title company for this lot 4 for the boundary line adjustment. Let me just zoom in on this so you can kind of see what that is. So part of this survey was to do a boundary line adjustment, go from this old boundary to this new boundary. So now we've got a new lot here, this lot 4 per the boundary line adjustment. And I'm sorry, we've got 2 lot 4s in here, one over here, but they're 2 separate platted subdivisions here. So let's go ahead and write a legal description for this, for the title company. So I'm going to go either into that traverse view, or I can do it here, but let's go into the traverse view. And I can see this one has got descriptions in here for the monuments that were there. We've got side shots. So we're going to treat this just a little differently. Let's go into legal description report. Again, we're going to use our default style, but we're going to go into settings and we're going to say, okay, again, I don't necessarily want those. Let's leave this on for right now, just so we can kind of see what it looks like. In the miscellaneous settings, I'm going to say I want to include side shots, include descriptions. That looks good. I've got area in there, so let's just hit preview here. So I told Traverse PC I want to create a legal description that, for now, while I'm previewing it, has bolded the values that are being inserted from the Traverse. So I can come up here and look at my North 76, 5829 West. Here it is. I can say this description of this first point was a found 5/8 rebar. Here it is. Okay. I can see the point label so I can track easily with the position in the Traverse here. And then look what else I did. I said, okay, this point at P1 has a side shot after it to a found 5/8 rebar. So I'm going to include a reference to that in my legal description. And I did that by going in and modifying these phrases. And I think that's the new line direction. Okay, here it is. It's the reference direction right here. So this is a phrase I said, if I've got a side shot out there and I can use it to reference one of these points in the legal description, then bring it in, and it brings it in like this. So with the bearing and distance to that point. So I can use this preview to say that looks like what I want. I'm going to go back into the settings and just turn off the core stuff I don't want for my final. I can preview that once again. Okay, I won't get the bolds in the final, but I'll get everything else. So now I can just generate the report. And again, I won't save that right now. So now I've got a legal description that I can send off to the title company. And I'm probably just going to come in here and say, okay, let's go ahead and save this report. And now if I go into my survey here, or look for the other reports, I've got this legal report preview doc. Okay, I could save it under a different name. Let's do that. So let's go to Tools, Save Report As. I'm going to do Lot 4 BLA, Boundary Line Adjustment. And I just created a Word doc for Lot 4 BLA. Now, if I go into the survey, open report, this gives us a shot. Okay, so here's our report right here. So I can open this with any word processing file. Okay, let's open it with Microsoft Word. Let's take a look at what we've got. So here's my legal description in Microsoft Word. Title company isn't going to be interested in any of that. Just get rid of it. Okay, and I can add whatever else I want, say whatever else I want in here. But I know that all of my values and my formatting are in here the way I want, and they're consistent. So that's the second thing, producing a report for a title company. It's real easy to get a Word doc out of that because that's how Traverse PC stores them in the report view here. Okay, the third thing I want to show you is how to do a Traverse report. In Lane County, if I turn in a subdivision, I need to do a separate report for each lot. I want to show you how we do that, something called the Traverse report. So I tell Traverse PC that I've selected some traverses here. Those are the highlighted ones here. And I want a traverse summary. I can include the traverse data, but I'm going to tell it I want a legal description for each one. I want to do a page break between each traverse, and I want the total and average areas. You don't have to turn those on, but I'm going to turn them on. Let's hit OK. And Traverse PC has come in now and created a traverse report that has lot 1, comes down and does a legal description. And look what it did. I've got those point labels and the single line. I don't want that format. So let's go back and do that again. Let's go into Traverses. They're still selected. Right-click, Traverse Report. But this time, let's go into the settings. And I just want to change this real quick so I get what I want. We're going to talk about there are some of these settings that I want for preview, I don't want for final, that sort of thing. And I'm just going to get this set up the way I want. Do with the side shots, uppercase, that all looks good. Okay, I think I got what I want. Let's OK those settings. And I don't know if I have to save that or not. Let's OK that. So now I've got what I want. I've got my error summary, my traverse summary, and then a legal description for lot 1, lot 2, lot 3, on down. Let's go ahead and print this out to a PDF file. And I want you to see what that looks like. So we'll put it right here in the webinar, Traverse Report, and then wait to open that up inside of Adobe. So I've opened this Traverse Report up in Adobe Acrobat Reader, and you can see here's lot 1. Okay, we had a page break between lots, so here's the next lot, lot 2, and here's this legal description for each lot, coming right in just the way I want. Okay, so real handy to get a report like that. So I wanted you to see just real quick kind of what these typical workflows would look like, creating legal descriptions inside of Traverse PC. And so we added a legal description to a drawing, we created a legal description for a title company, and we created a Traverse report for each lot that we would turn in this case, to our county. So that's kind of the concrete part of it. Now let's jump in and take a look at sort of how this all works and walk you through the pieces of it. So let's just jump right in to legal descriptions now. Let's open up this Traverse, our boundary line adjustment Traverse. Let's go to legal description report. And I see here that I'm using the default style. I can create any number of styles I want. So a style for a different town that I'm working in, different county I'm working in, different client, whatever. And the style consists of these settings, okay, distance, direction, courses, miscellaneous, and area, and then the phrases that I've created for different parts, for different geometry or sequences or whatever. If I make any changes to these settings or to these sequences or these phrases here, Traverse PC is going to say, do you want to update that existing style, or do you want to save it as a new style? Okay. And right away here, for this example, I'm going to say, let's create a new one called Webinars. Spell it right. And I'm going to save that. Put a description. I'll call it April Webinars. And I can simply just save that, okay, and overwrite the existing one. And if I make changes, Traverse PC will ask me if I want to save it also. So I can have styles then that do what I want it to do. I'm going to hit preview here, and I can see that this style includes some stuff here at the end for the area. Well, that's here in the area settings, and I can tell Traverse PC to include that or not include that. I turned it off, it doesn't include it. I turn it on, it does include it. I've got a miscellaneous setting I want to include. I want this user ending sequence in there that says all in Lane County, Oregon. Let me turn that off. I don't want that. Okay. So now I see the true point of beginning, said parcel being, here's the area part. All in Lane County, Oregon is that user ending phrase. So I've changed this style to do what I want. If I close it or generate a report, Traverse PC is going to say, do I want to save that or not? Okay. And I can say, yes, I do want to save that because I want it to look the same the next time I use it. So let's go back to Tools, Legal Description Report. Let's make sure the Webinars is the one that's in there. And it's going to have all these settings just the way we left them. So when I generate that report, I'm going to see the same stuff again. So that's kind of the beauty of styles. Now I will tell you, you're going to see me save a lot of setting changes, okay, particularly dealing with courses, because sometimes I want to create one line per course, like you've seen here. Sometimes I want to turn that off because I want it in paragraph form before I insert it into a drawing or hand it off to a title company or whatever. So you're going to see me make changes here quite a bit, but I may not always save those to the style because I often come in and set these the way I want each time I use the legal description writer, depending on what I'm doing. Okay, changes to area or any of the phrase settings, those I probably am going to want to update the style for that. So styles are a combination of setting and these phrases, and we haven't really looked at the phrases yet, but we'll get into those here in just a little bit. So let's take a look at our outline again here and bring up this setting here. Right after styles, I want to drop down to settings first. So I'm going to talk about these settings before we do the phrases. I think it'll be easier for us to kind of get a handle on this. So I'm looking at this legal description here for Lot 4 BLA, and I'm going to use numbered courses instead of labels real quick. So I see I've got one course per line, and let's come in and take a look at some of these settings then. It's the settings that determine how this gets generated. And of course, remember I said once it gets generated, it's a Word doc, so I can always come in and update this and modify it. But I want Traverse PC to do as much of the legal description for me as I can. That's just the way the workflows work the best for me. So I'm going to use the settings to get what I want. I can come in and I can tell Traverse PC, I want to use whatever units the survey is in, or I can override those. So I want to do this legal description in meters. Okay. My areas now are going to be hectares and square meters. And when I hit the preview report, I now have meters and hectares. Okay. Let's put this back to whatever the survey is using and make sure my areas are tracking properly with me, back to acres and square feet. Let's generate this, and I've got what I want. Now, you may not be changing back and forth between meters and feet a whole bunch, but look at this. Notice how every distance has the apostrophe for feet. Well, what if I want that to be feet, FT? Now they're all feet. Now everything's being uppercased because I said uppercase for everything. I could turn that off, and it would be the lowercase that I typed in, but I'm kind of used to reading these things in uppercase, so I turn that on. You might say, hey, you know what? I don't abbreviate. I'm going to spell out feet. So just type that in. Now, when I go to leave this dialog and Traverse PC asks me to save this, this is a good time to save it because that's probably a change I want to keep in there. Okay, let's look at direction. Direction is stuff like, okay, do I want to abbreviate degrees, minutes, and seconds? So look at these bearings here, and you're going to see the same thing in any curve information. Okay, so I've got a central angle here, degrees, minutes, seconds. If I don't want to abbreviate that, I just turn that off. Now Traverse PC spells out degrees, minutes, seconds. Okay. If I want to abbreviate northwest, southeast on the bearings, okay, now I'm going to have northwest and southeast, NW, SE. Or I can tell it, no, I don't want to abbreviate those, spell the whole thing out. Okay, so we're letting Traverse PC get as close as it can to what I want from these settings, knowing that I can always come in and modify that. So play around with these a little bit. You know, here's one that puts a bearing, a period after each one, and I think that's only if I abbreviate. Let's see if that works. Yeah, so north period, west period. Okay, if I don't abbreviate those, then I'm not going to get the period at the end, which is just fine. I'm going to come down to courses. Notice that I've got one line per course and a number of lines between them, and I've numbered the courses. When I go to produce this legal description, most of the time I do it in paragraph format, so I just turn those off. And now I've got a paragraph. Same information, but without the courses and numbered and separated like that. Let's come in and take a look at miscellaneous. I'm not going to talk about a lot of these, okay? Right now, we're going to get into these later as we talk about how the phrases are put together. But look, I can set the number of decimal places. I can tell Traverse PC that while I'm previewing, I want to bold any value that replaces a placeholder. So those are all the descriptions, the bearings, the distances. It helps me kind of relate those back to the Traverse where they came from. So I can come in and say, oh, here's the description for that first point. Here it is in the legal description. Okay, it's nice to be able to coordinate those a little bit. This is where I did the uppercase. And then I've got the same thing for area. Do I want acres, square feet? Do I want to spell that out, square, period, feet, or however I want to do that? Okay, I can do that. And then I can also include these or not. So if I don't want the area in here, I just turn it off, and I don't get it. If I don't want this closing thing that says all in Lane County, Oregon, just turn that off, and I don't get it. So I set up the settings the way I want, just by turning things on or off. And then I like to have a Traverse open and actually preview it here with this preview report. So I can see what it looks like throughout an entire legal description and say, yeah, that's what I want that to look like, what I'm happiest with right there. Okay, so that's the settings for the legal descriptions. If we come back to our outline now, we just covered the settings here. Now we're going to drop into phrases. And this is really the heart and soul, and we call it phrase-driven legal descriptions. So it's the phrases that are going to generate the legal description, and we'll get a chance to see that here. I'm going to leave this Lot 4 BLA open and leave my webinar here as my style. But let's come into Miscellaneous, and I'm going to turn on Include Phrase Keys, and we're going to put those in color red. Watch what happens. Okay, so now you kind of get to see how phrases fit into this. Traverse PC says, I'm going to start every legal description with a header. And this header says legal description, and then it has the name of the Traverse and the description. So if I come back to my Traverse and go to Traverse Properties, here's the name of the Traverse, Lot 4 BLA, and here's the description, as tied with due pins, boundary line adjustment, or BLA. Okay, so it's bringing data in using placeholders in this phrase with whatever text I've added. And let's come in and take a look at this phrase then so we can get to see how that works. The header, as well as the start at the point of beginning or point of commencement, those are all what we call sequence phrases. And the header is right here. So now I want to introduce you to what a phrase looks like inside of this dialog and how we work with it. And let's take this header phrase that the legal description started with. So when I highlight each phrase, the dialog on the right changes. Okay, so I get to see a picture of what that is, perhaps. I always have a description. I always have placeholders I can use. And then here's where I actually edit the phrase, and here's a quick example of what it's going to look like. So let's just take a look at this. My description says this phrase is used at the beginning of each description to form the title or header. Okay, it is likely that the position of the legal description will need to be customized after it has been created. So we don't assume we're going to have all the information in here that you want to get started with, but we're going to at least bring in the parcel name and the parcel description. And look what I did. I typed my own text in, legal description, and then I highlighted one of these and hit Insert Placeholder at Cursor, and it brought in parcel name. I did the same thing for description. And that's what created this lookup here. Now, let me do this. I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to say by Traverse PC Incorporated, parcel, colon, space, description, colon, space. So I get to see what it's going to look like down here. And when I hit Preview Report, I now have that text up here in my legal description. So you can think about how you start legal descriptions in your province or your county or your city or whatever, and let Traverse PC set up as much of this as it can. And then, of course, this report that it generates is a word processor document. So I can open this up in Word or modify it right here in Traverse PC's report view and modify it however I want. But I want you to see that the phrases say, you give me the text, I'll bring the data into these placeholders, and that's what generates the legal description for us. Okay, so let's take a look at another phrase. Let's take a look at the user ending. So remember we said back here in the setting, we can decide whether or not we want to include this user ending phrase, and we can decide if we want to include area. So let's go ahead and preview the report now. Here's this user ending phrase. And if we open up sequence phrases, user ending, see how it says comma, space, all in Lane County, comma, Oregon. Okay, so that's how Traverse PC included this at the end. What if there's some other things that you want to say about this? Here's what I might do. I might say, let's come here to where we can edit it. By John Balcom, okay, professional land surveyor, 44138 PLS. Okay, just like my Oregon license is written. So now I've got every legal description ending with all in Lane County, Oregon, by John Balcom, professional land surveyor, 44138 PLS. So every description is going to come up that way now because I modified that. We can do the same thing with area. I've included parcel area in square units and parcel area in hectares or acres, the area units, more or less. Okay, so you can change this text to whatever you want, switch these around if you want these in different order, and Traverse BC will then generate your legal descriptions that way. So that's kind of a neat way to look at phrases, and I've picked a couple of pretty easy phrases to edit, okay, the end user in the area, because I just type in the text and I get it. I want to jump to a little bit harder one though. Look at how, because most of these are just tangent courses, they're using the new line direction. So new line direction is a phrase that says, I've just got a new direction for a tangent line, and I'm going to put in the bearing and distance. So that's what I see for each one of these. Here's the new line direction phrase, okay, and this phrase produces everything from the end of the phrase to where the next segment starts. So all that text came in from this phrase. Now, I want to edit this though. And at the end of this, I want to say, tell me what that monument is if there's a description for it. So I'm going to position the cursor where I want it, select the placeholder, and insert it. So now it says to a point being. Now, I'm only going to get this description if it meets two conditions. One is I've put this placeholder, this phrase in here. It's called a nested phrase that says I want it. And then in the settings, I also have to tell it under miscellaneous that I want to include descriptions. And I see that these points have got descriptions on them. So let's see what happens when I put in this, change the new line direction with to a point being. I'm going to preview the report and look what it did. Every place where I started a new line direction, if it has a description, it first says to a point being A, and then it brings in the description from the traverse. Now, to a point being is a nested phrase, and we're not going to talk about that right now. I just want you to see that I can bring that in the way that I want just by modifying a phrase. And I can do this for any of the geometric phrases. Maybe when I do a line to a radial arc, I want to say that at the end of that arc, if there's a monument there, I want to show that monument. Okay, so I just include that same placeholder to a point being at the end of that description. And I can do that for all of the geometric descriptions or the ones that I think it should be in. And there are plenty of placeholders to choose from here. Okay, beginning of said curve being, to a point being, said point being. Okay, so those all pertain, and it's part of how you're going to learn to use Traverse BC. You're going to come in and just kind of play around with some of these until you get what you want for the most part. Okay, I'm going to show you one more thing here that is sort of a little more complicated, but I want you to see it. One of these nested phrases is reference direction. I don't have to include this in the geometric phrases because Traverse BC does it automatically. And it does it based on this setting that says include side shots. So do you see how after P1, C3-8 is a side shot with a description? So I've told it include descriptions, include side shots. This reference direction is going to kick in now. So Traverse BC is going to say, when I generate this report, if I have a side shot, I'm going to include this reference direction phrase, which says, this point, which is a found 5/8 rebar, bears, okay, or this point here at the end of this course, bears southeast some distance from that rebar. Okay? And I created that text for that in this phrase. Okay, so being, here's the direction, a distance of whatever the distance is from whatever the description is for that monument. And up here in the description, Traverse PC is going to tell me that it actually reverses the side shot that I see up here. Because this bearing goes from the control point to the side shot itself. In the legal description, I want to go from the side shot referencing back to the point in the legal description. So it tells me it's going to reverse that, and I can handle that. Now, if I don't want to say bearing, sometimes I've read legal description to say being. Okay, so I'm going to change that to being, preview that report. Now, every time I see a reference direction, it's going to say being south, east, a distance of whatever from whatever that monument is. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of walk all the way through the pieces to how a phrase works, and then we're going to jump in and take a look at some of the types of phrases here in Traverse PC. Okay, so let me go ahead and close out of this. We'll have Traverse PC save any changes that we've made. I want to close this Traverse here too. So here is my Lot 4 Traverse, and I'm going to tell Traverse PC just to delineate this Traverse so you can see that we picked up all of the boundary here in this. And notice that I've got a point over here which is not part of the parcel. Okay, so it's not part of the closed loop here that would generate the area. And I want Traverse PC then to be able to distinguish where the point of commencement is and the point of beginning when we write the legal description for this lot. So let's just jump in and take a look at that. And it's part of what we call the sequence phrases. So we'll just go into, I'll open this up because I want you to see it. Legal description report, sequence phrases. Okay, so how does Traverse PC determine point of commencement, point of beginning? Well, I'm going to come into this Traverse. I'm going to generate this report again here. And I see it starts at a point of beginning, but that's not quite what I want. I'm starting the partial at 1:1 and coming back and ending it at 1:1. So I'm going to come in first and tell Traverse PC that I want to edit these closing points. I want this to be a closed loop, but I don't want it to start at T2:2. I want it to start at 1:1. And when I update the closure view now, I'm going to get the area that I want. It's from 1 to 1. Okay, just exactly the way I want. So T2 is the first control point in the Traverse, but it's not the initial point. So watch what happens now when I preview this report. Look what changed. So now this Traverse starts with a line at a point of commencement. Commencing at a point of commencement, said point being a whatever, then some bearing in distance to the point of beginning, okay, or to the true point of beginning. Now I can start around the parcel, and eventually I will come back to the true point of beginning down here. So Traverse PC said, I'm going to use the information in the Traverse here to determine what's the point of commencement and what's the point of beginning. And the simple rule is that the initial point determines the point of beginning. So I can come into the closure view and say, oh, I'm going from 1:1, ending at 1:1 when I come back around. That's my closed loop. So 1:1 is the point of beginning. And in fact, if I were to come back in and do this legal description, and one of the settings options I have under Miscellaneous or under Courses is to put the labels in there instead of the course numbers. Okay, so I can see that when I do this T2-2 to 1:1, that's when I say to the true point of beginning, because by the time I get to 1:1, that's the true point of beginning. And when I'm all done with this legal description, I come back from P6 to 1:1. I'm back to the true point of beginning again. Okay, so Traverse PC has picked up on that. Now, what happens when we choose a different Traverse here? Let's open up a different one. I'm not going to save it this time. And let's take a look at the Lot 4 here. Okay, so Lot 4 is down here. Okay, and in the survey, we just did a property survey of some of these other lots here. So we picked up the pins for Lot 4. But look, it starts at 26:1, it ends at 26:1. If I go into the closure view, I've got a closed loop from 26:1 to 26:1. Now, I don't have any point of commencement in here. So let's take a look at what Traverse PC is going to do for us. Legal description report, and let's make sure it's using webinar. Let's just preview that. So it's going to start an arc at a point of beginning because I don't have a point of commencement in here. So commencing at a point of beginning, thence through all the arc stuff. Okay? So I'm picking up on the Traverse, the point of commencement stuff. Now, I will tell you that within the Traverse, I can come into Properties, and I can create a separate commencement chain. And if we have time at the end of this webinar, I'll do that for Lot 4. And we'll go up to that same T2-2 point, and we'll create a commencement chain down to here. And in fact, let me just do that real quick, because it might be too tough to, I may not get back to this, in other words. So I'm going to tell Traverse PC that I want to go into Traverse Tools, pick legal description commencement points, and let's come up and tell it I want to start at the northern end of that line. Okay, so it highlights that for me. I want to come down to the southern end of this line. Okay, I want to come down to wherever this line's at. That's my next one. Looks like I'm going to pick up that line. Let's draw it down. And I'll right click to tell it I'm done. So here's the commencement chain that I created for that. Okay, and I can view that in the drawing or not view it in the drawing. So now this Traverse has a commencement chain with it, and let's come in and preview this report now. Okay, so now we say, starting at a point of commencement, and let's turn on the labels again, just so we can see what course is what here. Starting at a point of commencement at T2-2, running all the way down until I finally get to 26:1 is my chain of commencement. So I'm going from point of commencement all the way down to where I finally get to the true point of beginning. Okay, so I wanted to have you see just a couple of different traverses and how we handle the initial point, closing point, and whether or not the commencement point is in the traverse or we create it with those chains, because that really lets us kind of get a feel for why we have these sequence phrases. So I can start a line or an arc at a point of commencement or a point of beginning. Then I'm going to have an end of commencement, which starts the point of beginning. I'm going to have an end of beginning, which is here at the end, all to the true point of beginning. Okay. Now, I've also got a couple of other sequence phrases. One is the area. So I can tell Traverse PC that if I want to include the area at the end, I'm going to have the square units and area units. I can reverse these or include just one or the other. And Traverse PC is going to say, I'll include that if you come into area and tell me to. So I've got to check that or I won't get it. Okay. Now I told it to include it, so here's my area phrase right here. And here's everything that followed based on what I told it to use in the sequence phrase. Same with the user ending. Okay, so here's what I told it to use for the user ending. In the settings, under miscellaneous, I said, include that user ending phrase. And that's how I got it in the legal description. So it's the sequence phrases that help me get started and get me to my point of beginning. And then when I come back around to my point of beginning, help me wrap up the legal description. That's what the sequence phrases do. Now let's take a look at the geometric phrases. Geometric phrases are what text should I use when I go from one kind of geometry to another. So let's just take an example of this. This is an arc to a tangent line. So here's a picture that says I'm coming out of this arc, here's the direction arrow, into a line that's tangent to that arc where the arc ends. And I want to tell Traverse PC how to do this, okay? So I'm going to tell it, thence line direction, tangent to said curve. So said curve is the previous curve, a distance of whatever, okay? Now, some people say that if I don't say tangent, I assume it's tangent. Okay. Some people say, I want to say it's tangent if it's tangent. In this particular case, because it's tangent, we're going to say that it's tangent. So I can see that it's going to look like this. Thence north something west, tangent to said curve, a distance of whatever, whatever. Now, I don't happen to have an arc to tangent line in this particular traverse here. Okay, it doesn't exist in here. So I'm not going to have a chance to see what it looks like here. But we've got a sample survey in Traverse PC called Phrase-Driven Legal Descriptions that has all of these geometries in it. So you can just open that up and use that traverse instead of like the one I'm using here, and you'll see all of these. In fact, they match the examples that are used here. So you can have something to play with all the way through. Let's take a look at the ones we've got. We do have new line direction in this traverse. So we can come in and remember I added this to a point being. So thence some direction for a distance of some length and then a point being. Maybe you don't want to say for a distance of. Maybe you do want to say just a distance of. So this is the example of what that's going to look like. So if I don't have a preview opened here, I can at least see what it's going to look like right here. Or I can hit the preview report, and now I can just read them. Okay, thence south, something east, a distance of 49 feet. Okay, you look at that and you say, no, I want that for back in there, preview it for a distance of, and I've got it. Let's take a look at the other geometry that we've got. New arc direction small. Okay, new arc direction small. So small and large says, in the small phrase, I basically have a curve that's oriented by either the previous geometry being tangent or by a chord bearing a distance. So these are typically curb returns, short segments. Okay, large typically say I have a PCPR direction, like it's shown here, that is going to orient my curve. And this is more typical of what we might have for highway curves or road curves that are large radiuses. Okay, so I'm not going to stand at the PC and look to the PT. I just can't see it. I'm going to use this reference bearing instead. But we do have one of these small directions here. And this is the text we get to the beginning of a curve concave to the, and then the direction, having a radius of arc radius. And you can see whatever's in here. Remember I added that to a point being at the end before? So let's do that again here. To a point being. Let's recreate this. So here's my new arc direction small. Okay. I only include to a point being if I have a description. So I don't have a description at this PC or PT here. So I'm not going to get anything at the end here. If I had a description in here and I said to a point being, that would be the end of this arc. Okay, and it would include the description of that point here at the end. Now, I go from a direction that is generally going to be maintained along this curve here. I've got I should probably turn on the central angle. Let's just look at it from here. Central angle of 92 degrees. So this is getting close to where I might want two directions to describe the curve. Traverse PC says if the central angle is greater than 120, we're going to describe it both as a direction at the start of the curve and the direction at the end of the curve. And that's what's happening here with this arc combined direction. So it says thence southerly along said curve. So this southerly is enough to describe the direction of that curve. And here we're not looking at the picture over here. This picture is just some samples that are included with the dialogue. We're actually looking at our example here. So let's drop over and take a look at this lot 4 here and pull this out of the way a little bit. We're going from 26.1 to 21.8 northeast. So we're drawing from this line over. And then we're starting in along this curve, and we're saying thence southerly along said curve a distance of 52 feet, okay? Thence south, a distance of 78 feet from this cusp here. So we can kind of see what it's describing. If this central angle had continued on around, then Traverse BC may have said something like, thence southerly and easterly, okay? Or southerly and northeasterly, depending on the direction that it came out here. And Traverse BC uses quadrants and partial quadrants. So you're going to see southerly, southeasterly, easterly, that sort of thing for these directions. And I can just follow it along then and say, okay, if I have this arc combined direction, I want to include that here in the description, in the phrase. So here's my arc combined direction, okay? And following that, I want to say along said curve a distance of to a point B. So Traverse BC is tracking and creating this description exactly the way I told it to, based on how I had created those phrases. Now, I also have arc to line from cusp, so I can say arc to line from cusp right here to a point of cusp, okay, thence distance and length. Okay, so I see to a point of cusp, and that's the end of that course. Here's my next course, thence some distance and direction for a new line. So that kind of gives us a feel for how these geometric phrases work. We don't have the spiral phrases in here. We hope to have them in and ready to release by the end of April, working on those now. We've got all the lines and arcs in here currently. So there'll be another section down here for spiral phrases. We'll keep those separate because not everyone deals with spirals. And you can come in and just create what you want from these then. The last type of phrase we want to look at are the nested phrases. So I'm going to exit out of this. And I want to open up that Lot 4 BLA Traverse again. And let's pull ourselves back up so we can take a look at it. We've got one curve in here. So we're going to have just one curve in our legal description. But I'll be able to do some of the other things I want to do with these side shots and descriptions. So let's go ahead and create the legal description for this. Let's go ahead and view that report. And again, remember we had all this, these phrases turned on here. And we talked about coming into the geometric phrases like this new line direction and including the nested phrase to a point being. So we're listing placeholders that bring in just one piece of data, and we're also listing nested phrases. So this is to a point being is a nested phrase, and we're going to find that down here, to a point being. So anytime that Traverse BC meets the requirements in the new line direction to bring in this to a point being, the nested phrase tells us how we want to do that. Now remember, this requirement says I need to include descriptions. Okay, so I'm getting to a point being all these places because I've got a description for these. And let's come in and again turn on labels here in the courses. Remember I said we make changes to some of these things quite often, and I'm not necessarily going to change or save that because I'm likely to change it back the next time I use it. So I'm not going to be real strict on that. But here's my new line, and now let's go ahead and generate this. So I've got my point labels in here. I can see that, let's take a look at P3 for instance. So here's 5:1 to P3 to a point being because here's my description. Okay, P3 has a description. So when I go from any point to P3 and I've included this nested phrase to a point being, Traverse BC is going to say, oh, I'm going to bring that point in because you've told me to, because it has a description. Now, what it brings in is what I've told it to in that nested phrase, to a point being, right here, to a point being a whatever. What if I want to say a found? Because I want to know that everything was found out there. Let's preview that again now. To a point being a found 5/8 rebar with a yellow plastic cap, set this survey. Okay. Maybe I don't want to include that. Let's take that out. So every time that nested phrase gets included, to a point being, it uses that terminology. Let's take a look at our curve phrase here. We've got just one line to tangent arc. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at our geometric phrase, line to tangent arc. And notice it says beginning of said curve being. So let's go in and put a description in for this PC here. And let's do a 5/8. Okay. So we've got a description in for that now. Let's regenerate this. And look what happens to our line to tangent arc. To the beginning of a curve tangent to said line. Okay. Beginning of said curve being. So here's that nested phrase, which it brought in because we have a description. Beginning of said curve being a 5/8 rebar with the yellow plastic cap, LS 44138. So beginning of said curve. That's a nested phrase, which we're able to bring into this geometric phrase, and we edit it down here, beginning of said curve. Beginning of said curve being A, and then whatever the description is. So we have complete control over the text that shows up, and whether or not we want that to show up. Okay. So if we don't want it to show up, we just tell it don't include descriptions, and we won't get that. If I'm okay with all the others and I don't want that beginning of said curve in there, then I need to go into that geometric phrase and I need to take that out. Okay, so I just get rid of it. Now notice there's my colon, so that's the end of the course there. If I preview it now, my line to tangent arc just simply ends. Doesn't have the beginning of said curve. If I want to put that back in, I position the cursor where I want. I insert that placeholder. There it is. Okay, so that's all the time we have today for the webinar. That took up the whole hour pretty much. I'll close the webinar here. I'll keep it open a few minutes for question and answer. And I want to thank you for joining us to take a look at Traverse PC's new phrase-driven legal descriptions, available in version 2018, release 1, due out the end of April. Thank you for joining us today. Bye now.